I graduated from Santa Clara University in 1983, which is a Jesuit college in Northern California. And at the wise old age of 21, I decided that I didn't think then President Reagan deserved a second term. I'm one of the few people that still admits that in a crowded room. But anyway, so I went to work for the other guy, Walter Mondale, who had been Vice President of the United States. It was a fantastic experience. I figured I could make a living doing something I loved, which was working on political campaigns. My parents were a little horrified, by the way, they thinking I could never support myself, but I could. The campaign can only be described as a political catastrophe. We lost 49 states. But I did, again, find something that I really loved to do. And so after the Mondale campaign went down in flames, I went to work for the mayor of Los Angeles, who at that time was a man named Tom Bradley, who was a wonderful person and a tremendous influence on my life. And in 1986, he ran for governor of California. He lost in a landslide. So I went from there to the Dukakis campaign. And when that one had its predictable flame out, I went to work for Dianne Feinstein, who had then finished 2 incredibly successful terms as the mayor of San Francisco, and she was running for governor of California. And of course, with my help, she lost. And it's the only statewide campaign that Dianne Feinstein has ever lost. She's since, without my help, been elected to the United States Senate now 3 times. So it's pretty easy to understand why Bill Clinton called me in the fall of 1991. But he did. Actually, his people called me. But I knew him. I knew him a little bit. Democratic politics is a small world like academia or New Jersey. You know, if you spend enough time here, you get to know a lot of people. So I figured, well, when the Clinton people called me, he was getting ready to run in 1991. And I thought, well, I've already worked on every losing presidential campaign. I don't really need to replicate that experience because President Bush, the first President Bush, was still very popular in the wake of the Gulf War. And the other thing, again, Democratic politics being the small world that it is, Bill Clinton had a bit of a reputation, even back then, and at the time it was sort of called a Gary Hart problem. In hindsight, for those of you who are too young to remember, look it up. It sounds almost quaint in hindsight to say that he had a Gary Hart problem, but anyway, I decided to go interview with then Governor Clinton. And about 15 minutes into this conversation, which he never asked me a single question about my background or qualifications, he only wanted to talk about his vision for the country and how he really thought we could move together in the right direction. And I was so inspired, I was agreeing to move to Little Rock, and my friends thought I had lost my mind. And at that point, Bill Clinton's national name recognition was 6%. That means not that 6% of people were even thinking about voting for him, only 6% of Americans had ever heard of the guy. But we went from there to somehow winning the Democratic nomination for president, and then, of course, Bill Clinton was elected president. And I was named White House press secretary. And it was the campaign was a fantastic experience, and of course, working at the White House was a wonderful opportunity, and I will always be grateful to the president for having given me the chance to serve. I traveled around the country and around the world. I got to meet amazing people and see history unfolding right in front of my eyes. I mean, things I imagined I would only read about in history books, I got to witness firsthand, and that was a wonderful gift and a wonderful opportunity, and it changed my life in a million ways. That's not to say it was easy. I was the youngest person, as Mark said, and the first woman. I add to that I was from California, and I call that the trifecta of how not to go to Washington. I mean, the truth is, it's just it remains harder for women to establish authority, particularly young women, and I struggled with that. And I had to work harder and sometimes overcome obstacles. And the only thing that you can do in that situation is get up every day and do the best job that you can. And it was difficult sometimes, but I learned a lot, and it was a wonderful experience, and I wouldn't trade a minute of it. And I think one of the most important lessons that I learned in that first chapter of my life was to do something that you love, because you cannot predict where that path will lead. I certainly did not know when I went to work for the Mondale campaign that lost by a bazillion votes, that I would ever end up in the White House, and yet I just kept doing the thing that I cared about, and I ended up in a place that I could never have imagined. And I also had one heck of a good time on the way. I loved not every minute of it, let's be honest. Anyway, it was a wonderful experience. So I encourage all of the young women in this room, while you're here at Douglas College, when you leave, to just follow your heart, because there's nothing more important than doing what really what you really care about and what really makes you feel passionate.